evening. So I'm going to give you a brief update on the service standards work in the district. I've been doing this work not quite a year at this point, so we haven't had a full cycle, a full school year cycle to have some data, but I pulled some that we can look at this evening. So just a reminder of the service standards work and where we were. As a school district, we needed to identify our service standards. And just to refresh your memory, it's safe, caring, and resourceful. And it does fall in that order. It really helps staff in their day-to-day work and to navigate the complexities of that work, keeping in mind safety first and foremost, caring, and then resourceful. Certainly, we see great service when people, process, and place collide. So when those three things are worked on and constructed and really engineered, they come together to provide excellent service within the district. So we're focused on all three of those content areas. A lot of people think of service standards as just customer service, and while that's one element of it, that's not the totality of it. As we do this work, we map the full picture, and I replaced that dotted line for you that I showed last time I was up here, because that is quite literally what it looks like. We map out the service experience as it exists. We do that very collaboratively with all parties who have any part of that process, whatever that process is. And then we identify each moment in time is that red, green, or yellow, really as it pertains to the customer, not as it pertains internally, although we do have discussions around that certainly. Our mind is focused on the customer's experience. So we put ourselves in their shoes, keeping in mind that sometimes the customer is an internal customer as it pertains to working interdepartmentally or as it pertains to human resources and the employee experience. So there are a lot of moments where we are talking about the customer being internal, but sometimes we're also talking about the customer being external. And so we map the entire experience. So what does that actually look like? Well, this is a kind of a snapshot of one of the sessions, and this is by no means all of what we worked on, but just a little snippet of what this can look like. So it does look kind of messy. I will tell you that whiteboards are my new favorite work tool. I thought I really appreciated my iPad, but can't do this work on an iPad. So we have utilized every whiteboard space in the building to do this work, and it tends to stretch out pretty far and wide. But it's about mapping it. It's about mapping it honestly, mapping it in depth so that we can really look at each service touch point and pick it apart together collaboratively. So a few examples of some of the work that is ongoing right now. The athletics, recreation, and physical plant services as it pertained to facility use is actually now in maintenance and has already been revisited once. As we go through this work, it will be important for us to revisit these individual processes on a periodic basis, because otherwise it's not continuous process improvement, it's process improvement and then walking away. And we don't want to do that. We want to continually improve our processes. And we know that we're in an ever-changing world. So once we're done with something, it doesn't mean that it's done and it's put on the shelf. It means that it's done, it's in process, they are living through it. But it always remains a living and breathing process and can be adapted. The student exit process is in the implementation phase. I say that because at this point we've only collected pilot data. We have not rolled this process out throughout the district. We have a wonderful new member of the student services team, Sandra Dukey, and I am really looking forward to working on this with her and getting her insight as she is a wealth of information in that area. Prospective family process, that is in maintenance. That is really our family ambassadors and all of the components that go into the way that we now welcome prospective families into the district and teach them about our school district and help them navigate the very intricate process of school shopping and decision making and what they need to know. Again, the student enrollment process that was started, it is on hold for the time being. We want to let Sandra get into the district, and then she and I will have lots of conversations about that enrollment process. I know that she's looking at MyStar and expanding the use of that, so lots of exciting conversations happening there. Onboarding of new employees. We are committed this school year to working as far through the entire HR employee life cycle as humanly possible. I say that because we never know, there's no timeline for this work. So you begin looking at a process, and sometimes it takes you down some of these little side roads because you realize there's another department that has a hand in the work that might not have been seen or might not have been as big as you think it was. And so now we have to do some investigation. We have to bring that department in. And so we never put a timetable on this work because I don't want anyone to feel rushed through it. Recreation has started working on how does an idea become a recreation program? How do we know that the market wants that particular program? How do we know where the price point is? All of the different things, and how are the recreation offerings supporting the instructional day? How is that embedded in our school district as a piece of who we are, as opposed to being seen as a separate entity? Because it's not. It is the school district. It is run by the school district. So working on that. And then the IA application and enrollment, Sarah Fairman and I have worked together for many years, and she approached me and was very excited about potentially revamping that. And they actually did roll that out. It is live currently. It is something that they're working on right now. And they're already seeing really great success from it, which is exciting. So I pulled this because sometimes what we have is in terms of feedback as we revamp processes or we start to look through them is not necessarily always quantitative feedback. Sometimes we only have qualitative feedback. And these are 4 points that I am particularly proud of as it pertains to the work that the family ambassadors are doing and the prospective family process, because there was a lot of feedback prior to their arrival into the district and prior to this program that was not so positive about people's first interactions with us. And we know first impressions mean everything, and you never get the chance to redo that. So this was an important piece for us as a school district to capture those families, to help guide them and navigate them through. I really liked the piece at the bottom here where it talks about we somehow managed to find and buy a house before we left Michigan, that urgency. And we feel a lot of urgency from a lot of families who do not live in Michigan, do not live in our district, and are looking at the schools and trying to navigate both a relocation and a school change. And so I think the family ambassadors, in working with relocation experts, with realtors, we now have a really nice holistic approach to handling prospective families and making sure that they have a positive experience and all of their questions get answered. We also have some really nice data now because we switched the way that we intake families right from the touch point number 1. When we look at service standards, we look at what is the very first touch point that customer has with us. Now, as it pertains to families, prospective families, sometimes that very first touch point is our website, and we don't even know that they're there. So we're still working on this process. We're working on some website intercept tools that will recognize that a family's been on the website shopping or looking at certain pages and that they might be stumped because we know certain length of traffic or pages looked at indicates that a person might be somewhat lost on your website. And so we can actually pop something up and ask them if they'd like to have a conversation with a real human being, which don't we all wish sometimes when you call and it has you press this button and that button and all you want to do is talk to a live person. We want to provide that same experience. So we're working on that. So you can see here just a few factoids that we've pulled so far from implementing this process this school year. This is new this school year. So this data has only been collected since August. So not even since July, but since August. 30% heard about us from a friend. So we know that word of mouth and word of mouth marketing is still incredibly important for us as a district. So that really helps us concentrate our efforts on the communication side. 70 families anticipate enrolling their children at the start of next school year. So that's important to know as we capture those timelines of when are you planning to come. 26 families elected to be placed on our tuition waiting list as they either wait to find placement of a home within the district boundaries or have no intention of moving within the district but want their children to attend Bloomfield Hills schools. And you can see a nice little graph of the schools requested thus far as tours. So obviously Bloomfield Hills High School is the number 1, but it's interesting because if you combine all 3 Bloomin locations, you certainly are right on par with those requests for the high school. So we can see that we have a very active and engaged, not yet school age ready population in our district that is anxious and excited to be a part of our school community. So here's just a little snippet from the IA process that was revamped. Previous to this, what we found was that the IA was collecting paper applications. Those paper applications were sorted. There was a lot of documentation that was being provided by families. There was a lot of documentation that was being provided by the child's school. There were multiple signatures that were required, and the ease of submitting an application to the IA was on the challenging side, we'll say, and certainly paper heavy. Once that paper entered the office, it was sorted. An individual file was created for each child, physical file, put into a filing cabinet to later be resurfaced if the child was lottery selected. Those who were not ultimately had to be properly discarded in accordance with all laws. And so this was a very lengthy, time-consuming process for someone to live by. If they were, of course, if the lottery pick was selected, then all of that paper documentation had to be translated into the student information system by hand. So labor-intensive, time required, lots of paper. At this point, they are on a digital process that is run through Qualtrics, which is a survey software that we have in the district. You can see that we can collect signatures. That's a really big deal for us to be able to collect a digital signature on an iPad, on a desktop, on a phone. As we know that typically we hover around the 50% of mobile use in the district, whether it's on our website, whether it's on our newsletters or any of our communication tools. So it's important for us to be mobile ready at this point. So all of this now filters in. We actually have email triggers that go to their school that ask for a counselor or someone to send the documentation. That can all be electronically submitted at this point. It all funnels and filters onto a single spreadsheet. Once the students are selected into the IA, a lot of that information can be uploaded. So huge time savings and lots of resource savings there. Our exiting families, again, just keeping in mind that this is pilot data only because we ran this as a pilot exit at the end of last year. We didn't quite catch it early enough to run a full cycle, but we are expecting to be able to run that this year. So 20% of the departing families started in a private school before coming to Bloomfield Hills Schools. So they started in a private school, they came here, and now they are leaving. 18% of families relocated for a new job. 77% of departing families felt extremely or very welcomed, yet only 65% felt respected. And so that's that same disconnect that's present in our community survey and reflective of how we're doing overall. But it's important for us to investigate those things, especially at the exiting level, because if those are things that we can be aware of, then those are things that we can correct. And we can't correct it if we're not aware of it. And then I have this chart here that indicates moving or just leaving. And so you can see there those that are moving out of Bloomfield Hills School District, those that are moving out of Michigan, those that are moving out of the United States, those that are going to a private school, and those that are going to a public school. There is more to do. So every time someone comes to me and says, hey, we should look at the process for, and then fill in the blank here, I put it on a Post-it. And then those Post-its live in my office. And they used to live in a section of my office, and then there were too many Post-its to live in that section of my office. And they happened to land and get very messy. And I thought, well, that's an interesting picture. So I grabbed that picture before I cleaned up all of my fallen Post-its. And so these are all of the processes so far that people have said, hey, what if we looked at, or what if we dove into? And so you see there's a lot of processes on the list. Far too many for us to get to in a single school year cycle, and certainly some that will require length of time and investigation, and then others that are very quick. I'll be honest, the IA process was maybe 3 or 4 sessions, and Sarah and I were able to do it, just the two of us, and really kind of work through it and talk through it. And she did a tremendous job in implementing that and working with her team and working with Oakland schools. So that was a much simpler service standards process. They are not all complicated. They don't all involve a giant whiteboard and a huge team, but in a lot of cases they do, and that takes a lot of time. So That is to say that we will be doing this work for the foreseeable future, and in the spirit of continuous process improvement, I don't see when the work will ever really be finished. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Shira. Comments, questions from the board?
Okay.
Quick question, I guess. So we're the fiscal agent for the IA. I'm sort of surprised that you're doing this work with them.
We support the IA in a lot of ways. In fact, they used to be on our website, and now they're on Troy's, and so I think they bounce to the expertise of the districts, and that's a really wonderful thing. But they actually gave me the opportunity. I felt really lucky in the exchange, because as we work on our own enrollment practices, as we work on our own registration practices, Sarah was kind of the guinea pig, which was really nice to have someone who was willing to pilot some of the things we were already thinking about doing and run it with a much smaller group of students, with that being the applicants to the IA versus our enrollment numbers that will come in annually, or our registration numbers that come in annually, because we register annually every child in the school district. So whenever you test things out, it's much nicer to be able to test them with the smaller population. So that was a win-win for us both.
So what's next?
So this school year, the HR processes, the life cycle of an employee is going to take a significant amount of time, because each phase is its own process. They do tie together, and we'll see a lot of overlap, but and we did start with onboarding, because it's potentially our biggest, most significant one right now that needs our time and attention, in terms of how many departments it touches and the fact that every employee goes through it. So I think as we work through that, we'll learn a lot, and we'll learn a lot about other departments' work, because inevitably, as I work through one process and I bring a department to the table to work on that process, they say, hey, what about this over here? Or we uncover some piece that, they've been struggling with what to do with it or how to clean it up, or boy, this is a lot of time, but we're not quite sure how to not spend as much time on it or as much resources. And then that's when I can start asking questions. And really that's my role in the whole thing, is just to keep asking questions. And then they surface the work and they come up with the ideas. And there's a lot of ownership of this for them, not for me. I love the work, but they own it and they work on it. And so we'll find more processes as we go. But certainly the HR is a massive focus for me right now.
So when you say HR, does that also encompass the not only working directly with our employees, but also how our employees are working with our community?
Right now, the HR process in terms of the life cycle is specific from the time that an employee enters our school district to the time that they exit. So, and then embedded in that would be professional development, would be the onboarding and training, would be all of those types of things. How they interface with our community might end up being other processes that we would look at in different ways, because they're going to interface with our community in many different ways. And so when we looked at specifically, say, facilities scheduling, we boiled it down to a very small group of people, that being athletics and recreation and how they were using the facilities. We did not do facility use in Bloomfield Hills schools. We did facility use in Bloomfield Hills schools by athletics and recreation, because it's just more manageable that way. And even with that small of a group, we probably met maybe 8 to 10 times, and with them each being at least an hour session and diving into all the different pieces, because there was so much to uncover and discover and then talk through, that it required that laser focus. So a lot of this work is very laser focused as opposed to more broad based. Once we clean up a lot of the laser focuses, we'll get to processes that can be embedded throughout the organization that can help dictate how community, interfaces with staff and how they interface with community. Those are things that we're always working on, but in terms of looking at that as a process, we would look at it more granular than that.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you say that we've begun to dig into the data around the folks who felt welcome but not necessarily respected?
Yes, and so we're starting to look at that, and part of the wondering that went around that was families who exit the district and how they feel. Because I think if you're gonna depart an organization, if you're gonna change a school district for your child, then you have some strong feelings around that. And so being able to survey and being able to get more information, often when we see something like that in a survey, that same survey might not have enough questions in it to answer the questions that evolve from the questions. So we have to dig deeper. And part of that is digging into that exit data. And part of that will be digging deeper into the culture climate feedback on an ongoing basis, because what we learned from last year's data is that we can't ask it one time at one touch point in the spring. We need to start embedding pulse surveys as a part of our daily work. So our team right now is actually working on those and trying to get those ready based on questions and wondering and feedback and things that were really nice to learn where we did have the whole data to answer the question, and embedding that throughout the school year as touch points.
Anybody else? Sure, thank you very much.